Okay, good morning to everybody. We jump back into Likutei Moharan, Torah Yud Beis, and we learned yesterday in great depth how this process, right, of the Lavan kind of Lamdin, who is connecting to the Armimius Sheba Talmud, to that aspect of the trickery that increases a person's own sense of self as opposed to leading to an experience of bittul. We learned how that is actually from Hashem. That's actually mechuvan me'es Hashem Yisbarach. It's part of Hashem's plan for that person to speak against tzaddikim. And we learned that in this incredible way, that tzaddik is actually able to use that expression of this Talmud Chacham's energy and the negativity that's coming out as a result of the learning of halacha in one form or another. And that tzaddik is able to utilize those verbal expressions of the Talmud Chacham, of the Lavan Talmud Chacham's words, and he's able to elevate them. And we learned about 3 stages of elevation. We learned that he's able to elevate them in the aspect of chibuk, in the aspect of a hug. He's able to then elevate it to the aspect of a kiss, of an ashika, and then ultimately he's able to elevate it to the aspect of zivug, right? Gufa begufa, which is yisod and yisod. And we learned in great depth, without getting into all the details now, that generally the way that this is done is really, it begins with the Talmud Chacham just being sameach, it's just being happy, and not only not sort of judging, but on the contrary, recognizing or judging favorably, recognizing that this is actually emerging not from a fundamentally negative place, but it's actually emerging from a positive place, because where it results from, where it comes from, as we're going to see also in the Rabbi Bar Chana story, which we're about to get to today, Be'ezus Hashem, and we'll finish the lesson. Where it comes from is actually Torah Sheba'al Peh, right? That's the source. That's the source for where this comes from. Actually, we're going to see more in Torah Yud Gimel. Actually, I don't know. We'll get to today, but we'll see a little bit about this there as well in the beginning. It comes from a holy source, and he's able to be mekabel it b'simcha and with yishuv hadas and presence of mind to understand this is the way the world works, right? Because the Tana reveals the Torah in such a way that it has the bechina certainly, of arach yamim biyamina, right? Where on the right hand side, so to speak, where the tzaddik is learning lishma and revealing Torah and the bechina of Yaakov, right? And Yaakov ishtam yoshav halim, and that's true, but it also is revealed with the aspect of Ismaila Isher B'Chavod, right? And that's Rebbe Nachman said that the Tana, the Tzaddik, has to go down into a realm of Loila Shema, even what he called a Shkia Daka, right? The slightest degree of deviation from that purity of focus and intention, for the purpose of then opening that channel so the Torah is able to sort of go to the aspect of the left side and thereby provide the power for all the Parnasa of Ismaila Isher B'Chavod. So the Tzaddik knows that. And the tzaddik is sameach, and in so doing, the tzaddik brings the bechina of yamina tichabkeni. Yamin is always chesed. Back to the beginning of the first part of that pasuk, which is smoiloi tachas l'roishi, and he's able to bring this person from the aspect of, through the aspect of chesed, up to the place of Binah, which we said really is the left hemisphere of the brain where that kind of learning is accomplished. And we're going to learn the next step of the tikkun in a minute, which we learned yesterday. But ultimately also the concept of a hug, is just heart to heart, right? There's a connection Binah to Binah. And that's where this begins, with the realization of what's going on over here, right? And that understanding of what's actually taking place on the level of this circumstance, of the Lavan and the Yaakov and the whole thing, like we learned. Step number 2 after the chibuk is the bechina of nishuk, is the aspect which the Rebbe said, that is the aspect of netzach and hoid, of Chochmah. That this tikkun is being done with the bechina of Chochmah, that Chochmah is the root in its form, Abba, right, which is the first Yud of Yud Kevavke, the Grandmaster plan. That's the place where we are building up Knesset Yisrael, building up Malchus from. And that's the aspect which we explained yesterday, to have Binah unified with the light of Chochmah. That's already part of the tikkun, because how did the problem come? Because he slipped into fragmentation in a very shallow, disconnected worldview that enabled him to then try to see, bad and negative and looking down. And with the light of Chochmah, so then Adarabah, then the learning of Gemara can become something lehepech. It helps a person really analyze the details to find the all of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in them. I didn't send any of the links from yesterday. I need a reminder. Okay, so if we could remember those 2 links, just remember to have to send them. Oh, that also, yeah. Better find that also. Okay. Those 3 things, Be'ezus Hashem. So the light of Chochmah that's shining through is able to unify, and then ultimately he comes up to a place of Yesod and Yesod, which is the dibuk of Guf and Guf. And that's the total Yichud Shalom, and in so doing, he's elevating this denigration. And he's taking these twisted and distorted and corrupted words that are really emerging from Torah Sheba'al Peh, and he's able to be misakin them. And that's what we learned yesterday. Let's take a look in the second column on page Tesayin Amud Beis, the second half, and we start with the word Nimsa. Nimsa, it emerges, Kishan Sadik Maska B'chachmas V'edei Me'ezet Tzirufim Shal Torah Sheba'al Peh Nasa Yidwan Tzirufim Shalam Din Doiver Lav. When the tzaddik is able with his Chochmah, right, because it has to come from a place of unity, that's where it's emerging from, this capacity to elevate and to rectify, and he knows which tzirufim of Torah Sheba'al Peh, meaning he knows which particular Gemaras it is that's leading this person to think the way that he thinks. Because everything emerges from somewhere, right? So every ashkafa that a person has, they weren't born with it, they learned it somewhere, which is very powerful because everything that's learned can be unlearned, or everything that's learned can be relearned. Right, and people have very strong opinions, but the opinions are usually founded on concepts. And if you go to the concepts and you challenge the basic premises, and you say, how do you know that? Where did you learn that from? And then you can bring it back to a place. Do you even believe that? Like, do you ever analyze that belief? No. Usually people have these archetypal beliefs, and then it just manifests in their opinions. But so you can't fight people on the level of opinions. But what you need to do is you need to be able to channel people back to the root premises of what they think. And that's a very, very important point. If you're ever debating with a person, you're not going to start debating him on the level of the issue, right? Because obviously you don't agree on the issue, so you're not going to convince him, he's not going to convince you. What you could do is to begin to, and it takes a little bit of chachma to see a bigger picture, to say, where is that coming from? And then you go straight to that point. And then you can have a much deeper discussion, and this is true across the board. So the tzaddik is starting from a place of chachma. See, he's able to know what the premise of this denigration is coming from. What must this person have been learning wrong? And he's able to go ahead and to, the tzaddik learns these tzirufim, va'osamem tzerev halacha. And he reconstructs it and he puts it back into the Gemara the way that Torah is supposed to be learned. He says, I understand why you think that way. I'll give you a silly example. It's not a silly example, chas v'shalom. It's just a very broad example. It's not so detailed. I'll tell you like this. It's just very general. But if you have a person who's against Hasidus, let's say, happens, should never happen, but it happens a person is just anti-Hasidus, right? So on the one hand, you say, wow, what a terrible thing, this person is coming against all the tzaddikim, and usually they don't know what the first thing about Hasidus, they don't know anything from anything at all about what Kabbalah is or Pnimis HaTorah is, and they're pontificating, they don't know anything. Fine. So there's on one side, it's hopeless, I'll carry on, and with his belief, I'll carry on with my belief, and we'll continue. But a deeper way, and this is a little bit more of a broad and Yushav way, with Yishav Adas, is to stop and say, what must a very accurate challenge to Hasidus be? Right? Meaning what would be a very relevant and understandable and reasonable pushback to teenagers learning Hasidus or Kabbalah? Right? Let's say. What would be?
Sorry,
right? No, lavdafka. No, a person, lavdafka. No, I'm not talking on the level of Messiah. I'm talking about the Adarabah. We're trying to get beyond the Messiah. What might an actual pushback be? It could be that this is going to cause a denigration of, the more standard limudim of halacha gemara. Possible. It could be that it causes a person to lean too much into the side of yediyah, not too much to the side of bechira, right? Which is possible, right? Or it could be a focus on subjectivity as opposed to objectivity, or it could be the aspect of individuality as opposed to community. V'chule, v'chule. All these things are real. In as much as a person knows the sugya, okay, there's not halachic sugya per se, but let's say I know Nefesh HaChaim backwards and forwards. So I'm able to come with a much more respectful perspective and say, I actually understand where you're coming from, and I actually agree with that. And here's how we can integrate those worries into the historical context of what Hasidus has been, right? And we could talk about certain safeguards that are in place, and we can speak about the necessity to balance things out so that we're cognizant of the other approach and interweave to make sure that synthesis is front and center, v'chulei, v'chulei, v'chulei. And in so doing, it emerges that this denigration didn't actually come from, he's a terrible person who's trying to embarrass Tzaddikim. He just learned the sugya wrong, right? He learned Nefesh HaChaim to an extreme, and he didn't understand that Nefesh HaChaim is actually agreeing very much with the Tanya, but you have to learn the sugya. If you know the sugya, then it becomes much, much, much easier to speak, and much easier to judge favorably, and much easier to understand. There's not that this person just shkia daka, and then it became more than a shkia daka. A little crack on the windshield ended up, shattering the whole thing. This is just a practical understanding of how this could be done. Obviously, the tzaddik is able to go much, 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 much deeper, throughout the whole corpus of shas and halacha that he has on his fingertips. Right? What the halachas were, what the hashkafas were before they became corrupted. Before it became a Messiah that nobody can explain, and it's just, venom and anger for no reason, right? That they can't even understand. Adarabba, the Messiah is the hood. I'm talking about popping the hood. What it becomes is a bunch of loving people who don't know anything, right? That's not what we're talking about. When a person has this wisdom, then you've brought out the ani chavatzelas hasharin, because ani is always a reference to malchus. So ani is in the bechina of chavatzelas hasharin, which is the rose before it's growing, it's green, right? Like Esther Yirak, right? Because Haisa, we said that Esther is the Shechina, and it begins green because it's undeveloped, and it's reflecting the undeveloped energy of the Kav Yarik Mechadash Chadashim, which is Binah, right? Before it's manifested in this world properly, and then he's able to elevate it from Chibuk to Nishuk to Yichud to Zivug, and then it turns into Shoshana Samakim, turns into a rose. Mebechinas Neshikin. And that's accomplished because of Neshikin, which lifts it out of Chibuk and brings it to Zivug. Bebechinas Sifsoisav Shoshanim. It's the Sfasayim, it's the Neshikin, it's the aspect of Chochmah that brings about this whole process. And it leads to Shoshanim, to Shoshanas Ha'amakim. Bechinas says Dabkas Rucha Berucha, this kissing again between the Tzaddik Tachton and the Tzaddik Elyon, the Tamil Chacham of this world, and the Tana in Gan Eden. And this is bringing about an actual zivug guf beguf shahashchina bin train tzaddik haya yasva, when the shchina is present, just like Ishri Yisha Zacha shchina shrui beinehem, right? That the shchina is between them. So we hear the shchina is between these two tzaddikim, and there's zivug guf beguf bein tzaddik elyon shu atana shechidesh zois haTorah v'achshav mashpia ba, the Tana who's mashpia the Torah from above, the chen tzaddik hatachton, as well as the lower, this worldly tzaddik, haloi meid laHaTorah umala lahashchina mai nukvin, who's learning. That's an interesting expression. Haloi meid leHaTorah, so haloi meid Torah, right? But haloi meid leHaTorah, haloi meid could mean to learn, could also in certain contexts means to teach, right? Haloi meid laHaTorah, he's sort of educating the Torah, and he's elevating this corrupted form of the Torah, the glitched, Torah Shabbat Peh that turned into something else, and he's able to elevate it up in Ma'i Nukvin Kadeshi is Dabek, so it should come to Dibuk Gufa B'Gufa. V'zeh Sif Voisav Sheishanim, his lips are like roses. Al Yedei Bechinas Neshikin, right? So because we said that Neshikin is the Bechina of the Svasayim, and that leads to elevating the Shechina from a place of Ani Chavatzelas Hasharai into a place of Shoshanas Hamakim, V'meila Sif Voisav Shoshanim, right? There's a connection between the lips and the aspect of the Shechina developing as a Shoshana. And the end of that pasuk is Noit Voice Mar Oiver, dripping with this kind of spice, this Mar Oiver. Lashon, that word Oiver, says the Rebbe, is Lashon Me'aver Le'aver, is referencing two sides, right? La'avor is to cross from one side over to the next. Aver Le'aver. What are the two sides? Tzaddik Elyon, Tzaddik Tachton. Sif Voisav Sheishanim, when through the Bechina of Chochmah, Netzach V'Hoid, and elevating this limud from a Chibuk to Nishuk, which leads to Sheishanas Ha'amakim, because it lifted the Shechina out of Ani Chavatzelas Hashard, out of its just green growing phase into full bloom, and that leads to the Sheishana. So then Sifsoisav Sheishanim, which is the Bechina of the Netzach Vayid, that leads to Mar Oiver. There's a good scent that's emerging Mishnei Avarim from both sides. Mitzadik Elyon or Mitzadik Tachton. V'zeo, and that's also shot in the pasuk Hadudaim Nasnu Reach. These Dudaim, this certain kind of plant, Nasnu Reach, give off a sense, and the Medrash says, don't say Dudaim, rather Dodim. Sheshnei Dodim, Hainu Shnei Tzadikim. These two lovers, the Tzadik Tachton and the Tzadik Elyon, Nasnu Reach. They produce a very beautiful scent. Unbelievable, a very dramatic presentation of what it means to learn, right? A very romantic presentation, but even more than that, I'm saying this is, Mamish just speak in such terms about a zivug, chibug, nishuk, and zivug, gufa b'gufa. Okay, so let's jump into the Rabbi Bar Bar Chana now. V'zeh sha'amar Rabbi Bar Bar Chana, and this is what Rabbi Bar Bar Chana says, L'didi chazali hurmiz bar lilita. He says, I saw the demon, the son of a demon. Hurmiz is like a shade, right? Take a look at the Rashbam, Shadehu, right? You see? Kedamrina Sanhedrin, Mipalkal Chesatoy, the Hurmiz, like half of the length, of the width, of the godel, the size of Hurmiz, was a Shindalit. He was riding on the top of the gate of Mechayza, the city. Or a hate parasha kirachiv susaim tatay. There was a parasha. There was a rider, like a horseman. What's the word? Cavalry. Yeah, sorry.
Cavalry is the.
Okay, a cavalier. So he was riding mitatay. I meant to say cavalry, but that's a much better word. Yeah, I was just saying. So a cavalier. Yeah, cavalier. Okay, I can't say this word for some reason. Anyway, he was riding below. So he's riding on the gate above, and he's riding below. Hormuz was way quicker. I can imagine with a fast horse, he couldn't keep up with this shade. One time they hitched up for this Hormuz 2 mules. And he stood on the 2 gates of another place called Doinag, which Rebbe Nachman is going to explain what that is. Vishaver mehai lahai lahai, and he was busy jumping from one mule to the next, this Hormuz, as the mules are traveling at great speed along the gates of this place called Doinag. Unikat trei kasa de chamer b'yidei, and he was holding 2 cups of wine in his hand. Umarik mehai lahai, and he was busy pouring from one cup to the next cup. Umarik mehai lahai v'loy natfa minayu natfa la'ara, and not one drip fell on the floor. He was showing off. Right? He was basically showing like this magic trick. You know what I could do? Jumping from mule to mule with a cup and pouring and pouring and pouring. Obviously, there's incredible depth in every detail. Right? Not the least of which is that this is what demons do. They walk around with alcohol the whole time. Right? And that's a very, very deep symbol. It's not stam. Right? That where alcohol and alcoholism can bring a person. Right? So meaning the demon is holding alcohol. That's it's a very deep symbol. Very dangerous road, right? So Umarik Mihala and he didn't lose a drop. And Rabbi Bar Bar Chana says, don't think that this was a very pleasant, clear day, still day, which it would still be a very impressive feat. Right? He says, no, it was a hurricane. It was like mamash a hurricane that day. The Yal Shemaim Yard at times, like the pasuk says, right? Those who are traveling Yardei Ayam Ba'aniyos, right? And they go and it's a storm, and they go up to Shemaim and they come down to earth. That's where those words come from. Vishimis Malchusa, and the kingdom heard about this, and they killed him. They slayed the demon, right? Okay, so let's take a look at the Rashbam for a second. Hurim is Sheidu, Kedarminim Sanhedrin, we said, Akupa the Shural Shnishine Achayma. He was riding on the teeth of the gate, meaning like the top bit of the gate, riding on top. This is to show that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is merachem on his brias. Ve'ein noisim rishus la'ilu lahazik ve'gam shalei lotzis b'derech yichidi. This is part of the context of what he was discussing in the Gemara over there, that a person shouldn't go out alone. But you see that he wasn't riding on the path, he was riding up on the gate. HaKadosh Baruch Hu pushed him up. Re'eit prasha lefitumai is going to become important, because it's very, very deep. That he wasn't, the Rashbam makes it clear, the prasha, I'm not going to try to say that word, the person riding the horse, will be very simple today, just simply, was not trying to catch up with Hermes. He was just riding. I mean, this is what he was doing. He's just letting you know that if you were observing from a bird's eye view the two of them, and it was ki'ilu a race, Hermes is way ahead. Because this Shindalid was running way too quickly. But again, he's just making, which is like, who cares? But he's making it very clear, Rebbe Nachman is going to make out of this an asek, obviously, right? That he wasn't trying to catch up. He was just riding. Right? Meaning this is what was happening. Hermes is on the gate, and the guy who was riding the horse is underneath, and he wasn't being miskaven, but he couldn't have caught up to Hermes even if he tried, right? They sort of saddled up the mules. It was the name of a river. And these gates were very distant. They were the two sides of the river. And the mules are traveling, right, on either side of this river Dainag, and the Shindalit is jumping from one mule to the next. Tarti Kase, the Chamra, is holding 2 cups of wine. They were both filled. And he was just emptying both of them. Right? Mamish, this one full of wine that in the air, he was like sort of juggling, but he wasn't juggling the cups, he was juggling the wine, right? And he was pouring from this one to this one and then catching both of them. And then from this one into this one and catching them both. Right? I think that's a pretty cool trick. I would pay money to see such a thing, Amazing thing, right? That's like a great circus act. This is what he was doing. And not even a drip was lost. That there was a hurricane, or very strong wind. That those people who went down into the Yam with boats. Again, it's a paraphrase from a pasuk in Tehillim. They were elevated to the depth of heaven and down to the depth of the sea. Right, because the wind was so strong. Not one drop fell to the ground. Again, pasuk This is a paraphrase of that pasuk in Tehillim. The kingdom heard about this and they killed him. Malkin Deshido, the king of all the demons. Because he shouldn't have been doing this. He was showing off. He was revealing himself to people, and this is not the way of the Shindalid. They stay hidden. Because he was revealing their secret, which means, right, that if it's recorded in the Gemara, that with contemplation of this sugya can bring a person to understand certain deep things about how these demons work. The Istamre, and there are those that say no, that Bei Malka wasn't the king of the demons; it was Caesar. No, it was the actual Caesar. He thought that he's going to come and lead the whole world astray after him and steal the kingdom. Shindalid. May Adam Shabal Sheda. Fascinating thing. This particular Shindalid was from a person who had relations with a Sheda. I have no idea what this means. This is what Rashbam says, Vayadar Bein Anashim. And this person, who was the result of a union between a person and a Shindalid, who somehow was born into a body, I don't know how this is possible, he was a human being and lived among the people, and he was called with this name Hermes. Okay, let's see what the Rebbe says about this. Lididi Chazali Hai Hormis Perish Rashi. Always says Rashi, it's really Rashbam, but I think there's something deep about that as well. I have a theory, but we'll leave that for now. Perish Rashi Shindalid, who it's a shade. Bar Lilisa. He says, what's Lilisa? Is that Talmud Chacham Shade Yehudai? This is a reference to this Shade Yehudi, right? This elevatable Shindalid that is inhabiting the Talmud Chacham. Right? The son of Lilith. Lilith is like the female demon, right? So this was his mother. And this is connected to what it says in the Medrash. How did Moshe Rabbeinu know when he was up for 40 days and 40 nights? So how did he know when it was day and how did he know when it was night? And it says, Kishalam ad ima Torah Shabbat Peh Yadashu Laila. We already had this Mamar Chazal in Torah Gimel, right? Where we learned about Torah Shabbat Peh having to do with night, right? As we learned over there. So he says when he was learning Torah Shabbat Peh, he knew it was nighttime. So there's a connection and a correlation between nighttime, which is Laila, and Torah Shabbat Peh. So this person is a bar Lilisa, right? Lilisa from the standpoint of the word Laila, right? So he's connected to Torah Shabbat Peh. Aside from the fact that, like I said yesterday, Rebbe Nachman says later on in the sefer that Talmud is Gematria Lamed Yud Taf. It's literally the name of this demon, right? And so it isn't just Laila. He could make a much stronger connection. He chooses not to do so here. But these two things are bound together. It's a very risky endeavor, this. He's a lamdin, he's a Talmud Chacham, and that emerges from proficiency in Torah Shabbat Peh. This is a reference to the Tzaddik Hadar. So the Rebbe does something very interesting. He separates the subject from the rest of the story. So in the story, V'hava Ra'at HaKupa D'Shura is who rode on top of the gate of Mechaiza? Is this Hurmuz Bar Lilisa? The Rebbe doesn't do that. The Rebbe says no. This is a reference to someone else, which is very, very deep, right? So that means that Hai Hurmuz Bar Lilisa is just a reference to the Talmud Chacham Sheid Yudai, the aspect of a Lavan. Then the next words that are relating to that subject, V'hava Ra'at HaKupa D'Shura, V'hava means and he was, says the Rebbe, this is someone else. This is okay. So you have to halt cup. This is Hurmuz Bar Lilisa, is the Sheid Yudai. V'hava Ra'at HaKupa D'Shura is the Tzaddik Hadar. This is talking about the Tzaddik Hadar. Shetamar Chacham Sheid Yudai Roidef as a Tzaddik Hadar. V'hava Ra'at means that this person, again, who is not Hurmuz Bar Lilisa in the Rebbe's conception, is the Tzaddik Hadar who is referenced by that which Bar Lilisa is pursuing. So V'hava Ra'at means that Hurmuz Bar Lilisa, who is the aspect of the love and Talmud Chacham Sheid Yudai, is running after the Tzaddik Hadar. So he's reading it not at all in any way, right? V'hava Ra'at, meaning he was pursued Akupa D'Shura, or the Hurmuz Bar Lilisa was pursuing Akupa D'Shura. Why is the Kupa D'Shura the top of the gate? Why is that the Tzaddik Hadar? See, he explains. Shetamar Chacham Sheid Yudain Roidef has a Tzaddik Hadar. The Hurmuz Bar Lilisa, the Laila, the Lilis, the aspect of Talmud, is running after the Tzaddik. He was running after the Kupa D'Shura, not on the Kupa D'Shura, but over here he was pursuing that which is represented by the Kupa D'Shura. Who is that? The Tzaddik Hadar, Shenim Shalachayma, because the Tzaddikim are considered the wall. The Gemara says in Baba Basra, Tamar Chacham Tzarech L'Netirus, so the Talmidei Chachamim don't need walls. They have protection. They are the aspect of a wall. The Talmid Chacham is the wall. He is his own wall. He's his own protection. Ayin Sham. Ureheit Parasha Perish Rashi Lefitumai. Ureheit Parasha. What's the Parasha? Is Zahatana. Zahatana Shechidesh Zois HaTorah Upersha Isayafa. Why is he called Parasha? Because of the word Perish, right? He's trying to explain the Mishnayos. That's the whole thing of the Tanaim and the Amiram, or the Tanaim, right? Is to explain Psukim and to bring them down into Mishnah, and then the Mishnah comes and is Mifurash in the Gemara. But Parasha is a reference to the Mefaresh. And he's revealing the secrets of the Torah, meaning the inner depth of the Torah. And I can say secrets because even though we're not talking about Kabbalah here, we're talking about halacha. We already learned in Torah Yud Aleph, right, that halacha is razin, secrets. Kabbalah is razin de razin, but halacha is mamish mystical. Halacha is mamish secrets. Gam oisai roidef, he's running after not just the Tzaddik Hadar, but even the Parasha, right? So again, you have to read this. V'hava Ra'at HaKupa D'Shura. This Hurmuz Bar Lilisa is running after the Kupa D'Shura and Parasha. At the Parasha over here is the reference to the Tana. So he's not only running after the Tzaddik, who's the Bechina of Chayma, he's running after the Parasha. Gam Oisai Roidef, but Aval Lefi Tumai. But he doesn't mean to. That's what the Rebbe says. Lefi Tumai, right? And that's what the Rashbam said. The Parasha wasn't trying to chase and catch up with Hurmuz. He was just doing his thing. He was riding Lefi Tumai. right? He doesn't mean to, to attack the Tana. And in a certain sense, he doesn't even mean to attack the tzaddik, right? Meaning he thinks he's lishma, or he thinks, I don't know what he thinks, but it's lefi tumai. He just doesn't know better. That's very powerful. If you remember what we learned at the very end of Torah Vav, where Rebbe Nachman is speaking over there about judging l'kaf schus. Remember, we connected that to the kaf. Kaf is keser, keser is eker. Remember the whole thing over there? And the Rebbe said, Rebbe Nachman says that part of being silent when someone is embarrassing you is to judge that person favorably. Meaning, it's not just enough to say, he's right, and I'm terrible, and it's not fitting for me to give a response because I have no kfayt atzmi and all kfayt shemayim. That obviously is the tikkun that we're speaking about. That staying silent is, Rebbe Nachman says, the ikra tshuva kishi yishma b'ziyana yidam v'yishtak, and that's true. But we learned over there that there's a deeper element that has to do with actually judging the person favorably. I just want to read the lashon. I don't usually do this, but just because it's so connected and it's such an important nakuda. Nimtza shal yidei shedanan hakol kaschus shal yidei shoyskin loy kishmavazen isai ki moitzem beschus she'ein chayav kol kach b'mashem mavazen isai. He's not so bad. Ki lefi daitoi usvarasai nidmaloi sheroy lo azai. Obviously, he's not stam, Jews don't do that, right? Meaning, he has a perspective. It's incredibly deep. That means that it's behooving me, not just not to respond because, okay, whatever, to understand where he's coming from. This is the tikkun of Chochmah. That's how the tzaddik is able, right, through chesed and ava, to be able to bring this person up to Binah and then up to Chochmah. How? By recognizing that lefi tumai. We don't assume that people are what's the word? An English word that they intend yalahaches. That's also not English. No, it's Yiddish. No. Right? We don't expect the word has slipped my mind today, but the word we don't expect that people are stam acting out of malice, maliciously. We try to learn it like a sugya. We use our own Gemara cup and our own knowing how to take apart a page of Gemara and put it back together to be able to really analyze this person and not to take it on the shallow level and say, Lefi tumai, where's this person coming from? What's his perspective? How did he grow up? What did his Rebbe tell him? And it doesn't even stop there because you go back a generation, what did his Rebbe tell him? And you go back a generation, eventually, it goes usually back to the Holocaust or it goes back to some trauma somewhere. And someone was so hurt and they clammed up and after the Holocaust, they had to just rebuild the basic bare bones of the framework of Yiddishkeit, and they went to an extreme perspective that basically cut Hashem out of every area of life other than sitting in front of a Talmud, for all intents and purposes. Because they had to build, yeshivas and rabbanim and dayanim and mikvahs and kashrus and so on and so forth, and they needed people who learned, and now it became this thing where every single person has to do every single thing that everybody else is doing in a very specific way. Whatever it is, but you understand, where's the person coming from? So that's very, very crucial. Ki alamdin, again, so gam oisay reidev, avalafi tumai. Ki atamu chacham sheir yudi ina mechaven lir dev satana. V'zoyser edif anasa memela. But little does he know that he's corrupting the whole thing, the whole Messiah. He's corrupting because this is not the way of the Torah. This is not the way. Ki rachiv susaya mitata'e. And there was a horse underneath him. What does that mean? Ki alamdin al yedei shaloi meter satana al yedei zemachzer nafshi shalatana l'seich gufay shalatana achzaras nefesh leguf. When the lamdin is learning in a proper way, he's bringing the tana back into his body. Why? Because susois of doiva voice bekever, like we said. V'zemei tata'e ki atachtoinim garmim b'limudam laharken nefesh satana al susay al gufay kamei shekasu susois of doiva voice. Right, and this is what we're supposed to do. When we learn, we're bringing the Tana back into Olam Hazeh. We're bringing the Tana, in a certain sense, the Nefesh, back into the body from the standpoint of Sasais of Daivavais for the Bechina of Neshikin. Right, and there's an aspect of the Ziva Gufa Begufa where prior to the Limud, the Tana is somewhere hidden in Gan Eden, he doesn't exist in Olam Hazeh, he's gone. But through the limud, we bring the Tana back in, and not just back in, but literally is menasheket atzmo, like we learned with the Tana, comes into the mouth, mamish, like the Tana is mamish here. And says, "Sivsais of doivavais bekever." But this didn't happen. With this slam did. who's Vahaved Roit Akupa the Shur is chasing the Tzadikim and Parasha and chasing the Tana, but Lefi Tumai, he doesn't mean to, but this is what's happening. So then Kirachiv Susayim and Tatai, he's trying to bring the guf, the Tana and that energy of the Tana's neshama down into the sus, right, down into the body, but it didn't work. Because the Tana can't handle such a learning. Because it's even worse than an Avela. This is not where it's at. Then at Taras and Shikasayne, right? And the kisses of a person who is an enemy is burdensome. And the Tana is running away from this. But it appears to you, and if it's difficult for you, like we learned in the lesson, how is the Torah not bringing this person back to tshuva? Why doesn't it work? And on the contrary, it's making him more and more arrogant. What happened to the Hama'or Sheba Machzir B'Lamutav? What happened of the Metoich Shalei Lishma Balishma? Where is that? That from the Torah that he's learning, it can cause the person to make such a terrible mistake. So that's the question that's being pavarned, that's being asked over here. It's the unspoken question. And the answer is because Zimna Chada have a masarg and they tarta chiyusa. From time to time, the Tana will fall into the slightest. We're going to see what kind of slight in a minute. Such a slight aspect of loy lishma. Kedei al yedeza yamshich la'olam tarte chiyusa. What's tarte chiyusa? Chiyus means livelihood. In this context, it means a mule, right? But it means chiyus, it's chayas, right? Livelihood. Tarte chiyusa. The livelihood of spirituality, which is ayrech yam and biyamina, and the livelihood of physicality, which is of a smoila isher b'chavay. So the Rabbi Bar Chana is answering this unspoken question: how did it happen that the Tana is teaching Torah in such a way that people could make a mistake with it? And he answers because tarte chiyusa. Because he needs to fall into Loila Shema so that he can bring the Torah to the tzad small, which is Smoila Oisher V'Chav, and bring Gashmi as Parnasa to the world. So there's Tarte Chiyusa.
This is a Chavschus.
Yes.
Ada, so it's like to the Tana himself that is learning.
Right.
Meaning that is his Chavschus, so that it's from the Tana himself.
B'diuk, that's what he said, right? That it emerges really from a very holy place. Yeah, it emerges from a very holy place. There are two kinds of chiyus ruchni, which is ayrech yamim biyamina, and the chiyus gashmi, and physical sustenance, which is besmaila oisher v'chaved. But the tzaddik who is so davak in chiyus ruchni to the reality of a Kodesh Baruch Hu of Ein Adam Avada, Ein Amater Es Atzmei Chas V'Shalom Mikol V'Chol Mechiyus Ruchni, he doesn't untie himself from the chiyus ruchni because you could think, what happened over here? All of a sudden, the Tana is like giving shir and he sees somebody wearing a nice watch and all of a sudden he falls at it. Like he's the Tana. He's not. He's bound up to the chiyus ruchni. He's not falling into gashmi at all. But a machme shayanafal b'chinas halimud shaloi l'shma b'shvil chiyus gashmi, but because HaKadosh Baruch Hu causes for him momentarily, but less than momentarily, to fall into the slightest aspect of self, the slightest aspect. We have no asaga what the Tanaim were. We have zero concept of what these people were. Mamish malachim, But they fall for the slightest second into a sense of self and loylishma. This is the aspect of it stands on the two gates of doinag v'shaber mahai and jumping from one to the next. What does this mean? Says the Rebbe, you know what doinag is? Namas kedoinag. Doinag means wax. This river was called the river Donag, but Donag is wax. What's the meaning of wax? Says the Rebbe, K'moy adam sha'omer al gesher shel shava. Imagine standing on a bridge of wax. And you can't stand there because you'll sink right in and the wax will break and melt. So kovet al gesher shein. So you have to jump to the second gate of wax. Imagine two gates of wax. They can't stand there either because that is going to fall in. Right? The second gate is also made out of like hot wax. Kovetz al rishona. So you jump back to the first one. Kovetz mehai lahai. And you have to jump from one wax gate to the other wax gate, because otherwise the whole thing will break. And so, right. So you want to go from place to place, but you can't stand there for any bit of time. So he's jumping from one to one to one to one to one of two. One step, one step, one step, one step, one step. What does this mean? Kain hatana. The same is true for the Tana. Ikr limudai tamad lishma. The Tana's limud is lishma all the time. But he is gashmi because he needs to draw down he is gashmi into the world. And how's that going to happen if his limud is only on the side of Arich Yama B'Yamina? It's impossible. There's no connection. So he needs to bring the bechina of Arich Yama B'Yamina to the tzad small so that can then filter down into Parnasa, however that works. So Mapilan I say from Shamayim, they'll cause him l'limud shalai lishma to learn something lai lishma. As I know limud limud bechinas lishma, and so they take him away from the limud lishma. V'shayvrim lishma l'shalai lishma, and he has to jump over to the side from the right side, right, of one gate of wax or one bridge of wax to the next. But then because of his incredible kedusha, he has to jump from shalai lishma right back to lishma because it's such a shkia daka. That's like for the Tana, that's like a bridge of wax. He can't stand there. He can't tolerate that. So they'll push him down into it. But it's mamish min hashamayim. What does he do then? He jumps right back to the side of lishma, right? Because he can't stand there. So he quickly jumps back to Lishma. Umi Lishma, Machmas Hechrich L'Tayvas Ha'ilam. Once he's on the side of Lishma, in order to bring sustenance down to the world, they push him back to Lishma. Which again is like a gate of wax, a bridge of wax. So he's jumping from Lishma to Lishma, Lishma to Lishma. And that's where it emerges in the Gemara, the aspect which is possible that although tzaddikim yelchubam, although the tzaddikim are able adarabba to increase their humility, to increase their amunah, as we saw that the great Talmidei Chachamim tzaddikim throughout the generations, they became humbler and they became sweeter and they became more gentle and delicate. So I'm with an inner gevura, but a gevura l'man Hashem, but in a balanced and calm and miyushab way. But it also could be Opaishim Mikashlubam. So that's how he's learning. Let's go back again. We're coming to explain how it is that the Limud HaTorah, that Hurmiz Bar Lelisa, this Shade Yehudi, who is Radaf after the Kupa the Shur, right? Kupa the Shur, running after the Talmud Chacham and the Parasha and the Tanakh, trying to bring the energy of the Tana down into the body, but it's not working. Why doesn't the Torah bring him back? And we answered, it's because one time when the Tana was learning, they understood min hashamayim that his Talmud is necessary, his learning is necessary, Talmud Torah is necessary to bring down chiyas to the world. Not just one kind of chiyas ruchni, arich yam b'yamina, but tarti chiyusa, which is chiyas ruchni and chiyas gashmi. And so kaiman atrei gisher to doina v'shavar me'alai. And so they pushed him from lishma to lo lishma, and he's jumping back from lo lishma to lishma, lo lishma to lo lishma. So what's the ultimate tikkun? How do you be misakin this? He took 2 cups of wine in his hands. Says the Rebbe, there's 2 aspects of wine. Bechinas Tarsh Balpeh, Bechinas Yein Malchus Rav, Bechinas Bina Liba. There are 2 kinds of wine. Wine could be the aspect of Malchus, and wine could be the aspect of Bina, right? And Bina is the aspect of Liba. Because the aspect of Malchus and the aspect of Bina are the same Bechina. The first Hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei and the last Hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Kav Yarek and Ani Chavatzelas HaSharin, right? These 2 things reflect one another. There's Bina and there's Malchus. Ultimately, Olam Haba is the Yayin HaMeshumer Ba'anavav. So Malchus, we explained this a little bit briefly yesterday. Malchus is the wine as it's revealed, as it's squeezed from the grapes and it's developed and it's in the the press, and then it comes into bottles and it comes to your Shabbos table. That's the Bechina of Malchus, right? It's a product that's been produced. It's been mitbashet. It's away from the source. The source is gone, right? And it comes down into Olam Hazeh. The Yayin HaMeshumer Ba'anavav means that it's a taste of reality as it's still wrapped up into the Matzil and into the Creator. That's the Bechina of Olam Haba. When we can experience this worldliness, not as something that's been mitpashet from the source, but something that is literally the ray of the sun in the sun, right? Meaning the Yain HaMeshumer Ba'anavav is the wine that previously was a Yain Malchus, like it says, Yein Malchus Rav Ki Adam Melech, and we bring it back into Binah Liba, which is the shacharis from which Olam Hazeh is mitvashet. Is that clear? That one, right? So that's the Nar Yotze Mi Eden Lahashkas as a Gan, right? The Gan is Malchus, Eden is Binah. And the Nahar, well, not really, because Eden is really Chochmah. But without getting into that, but I'm just trying to demonstrate, right, that there's the Nahar and there's the Gan, right? And ultimately, the Gan is like the finished product. Here it is. And to go back up to the source is the Yayin. That's the aspect of Bina. Says the Rebbe, oh, Trei Kasa de Chamer Biyadeh. He's holding 2 cups of wine. Says the Rebbe, Malchus and Bina. 2 cups of wine. Umoyrek mehai lahai. Says the Rebbe. He's unbelievable. He is unbelievable. Umoyrek. What does it mean, moyrek? Al pipshat? He pours. Says the Rebbe, Kavi Yarok Mechadish Chadashim. Right, which you already learned as a reference from Abraham Avinu by Yarek es Chanicha. Is also Kavi Yarek. Yarek by Yarek mehai lahai. There's a reflected greenness from one to the other. Mehai from the Kavi Yarek Mechadish Chadashim, which is Bina, which is Mechadish Chadashim. That's the grapes from which everything is born and everything is renewed. And then there's the greenness of Ani Chavatzelas Hasharim, which is Malchus as it is growing and developing before it bursts into full bloom of the redness of the Sivsais of Shoshanim. Umoyrek mehai lahai sheyamshich kavi yorek mehai lahai bebechinas vayorek es chanicha moyrek yarak yerek yarok v'zeh chibuk. This is the first tikkun. This is the hug. Sheyikabel ba'avas or adifa v'yismach v'yisurim. He's happy with the redifa. He accepts it. He understands it's part of the tikkun. And in a deeper way, which we haven't mentioned yet, it's an aspect of a dialectic process of growth where the tzaddik understands that this is the way it has to be. Very powerful. All this is so important. I'm writing a book now. Some of the chavura sent it to 1 or 2 guys who are talking about it, where I'm trying to present. That's the first time I've ever done something like this. The complete hashkafa, that sits at the core of literally everything that I teach and everything that I've learned in the area of pneumius. Where we are in history in a very practical way. Where we are in history, what's the connection between pneumius Torah and Geulah? What's missing? How can we bring it back? What are some of the perspectives in pneumius that have so shifted? I ran a study, where I had 50 people speak about the impact of pneumius on their lives, and I mamish bring all the data, and I really putting this thing together, siyata d'shmaya, and it's Ezras Hashem, and okay, so I'm working on this. In the beginning, I have a whole Mesiras Moda, just a declaration of intent, like sometimes Svarim have, and I wrote over there that, and this is how I began it. I said, I don't claim. Oh it's late already. I'll just say this very briefly. It's important. I said I don't claim to present over here the truth. I don't know what the truth is. What I'm presenting in this book is years and years of searching in an authentic way to figure out an approach to theology and the world and history that resonates for me. And I feel the need to present it. And I said I'm under no illusion that the people and every person who reads this book is going to agree with me, and that's okay. Because I understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world in a system of dialectics. I am not going to save the whole world. What I'm going to do is to present my little data point. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs other data points that are of other persuasion, and they're going to be pushback, and that's okay. Like I already, me from the outset. So this is the aspect, right? From me to a tzaddik, but over here, the tzaddik recognizes as a redifa. They understand this part of a process. Now Hashem unfolds the world in a system of dialectic. There's chesed and there's glura and then tifer and then netzach and then hoid, and this is the way the world works. But in order, and there's a key point, that doesn't mean that I roll over and say, okay, yalla, so whatever, so I don't have to contribute my bit. No, that in order for the dialectical system to work, I have to be passionate 1,000,000,000% of my nakuda. And at the same time, I have to have enough presence of mind to understand that the other person, Hashem needs them to be passionate 1,000,000% about their nakuda. And these two things are not a stira. Let's finish up quickly. I'm sorry we're going over time today. Just finish up. This brings it up to chibuk, the greenness, like we learned. That's the absolute chibuk. Not even one drop reached the ground. The time is how the day was a hurricane day. The Shechina then sits between two tzaddikim. The tzaddik elyon, zebechinas yealu shemayim. Right, that's talking about the tzaddik elyon. Mar oiver, me'aver le'aver, that's the tzaddik above. And yer to tahim is zebechinas tzaddik tachtoin. Zebechinas neshik, and this is the kissing. Bebechinas noitfos mar oiver. So that's the natva, right? The natva, not a drop. So this is an aspect of size of Sheshanim, noitfos more over dripping. Val yedei manasa bechinas neshikin, bechinas noitfos more over. And the answer is idea Chochmah keniskala el through Chochmah, like we said. V'zeu shma malchusei k'talei. Hanashe yaskel v'yishma satar shbal peh hanikar malchus peh. So he heard the malchus in there. He heard the malchus of Shema Malchusa. He heard this aspect of the Talmud Chacham denigrating him, and he heard it in their Torah. He said that that's coming from a distorted hashkafa, that comes from halacha. Hanikar Malchus Peh. He was able to understand from the words that are coming out of the mouth of the Talmud Chacham Shei Yehudi. In the time where he's being embarrassed and denigrated and shamed, he hears Torah Shabbat Peh. It's coming out in a crazy form, but he hears Torah. And then he's able to kill the Shade Yehudi. Doesn't mean like kill the Talmud Chacham, but it means he's able to rectify him. And in so doing, he's able to get rid of that demon, which we learned about is not a shade mishade nuchrayin, right? It's not a non-Jewish shade, right? Which is the aspect of it can't be elevated in the same way. It's a Jewish shade, right? And that means that it's shaykh to us. We just have to elevate it. That's all. Where did the shade get its energy from? From the fact that he was taking the Talmud Torah Shabbat Peh and bringing it to the other side. And that's where it got its energy. So so when you elevate the Shekhinah, you lift it up, and you take out the nitzotzos that are scattered and fragmented and shattered and distorted, and you unify the Shekhinah and you elevate it, then the Shade Yehudi has no energy left. He has not, because that was his energy, and now he's dead. Right? When you rebuild the structure, they killed the Shade Yehudi. Let's finish up. As it appears, Tehillah the David, Tehillah Lashon Irbuv. The word Tehillah, which means to praise, can also be an expression of the word Irbuv, which means a confusion. Hashem has placed bewilderment among the Malachim. David Zebechinas Torah Shabbat Peh. David is the aspect of Malchus Torah Shabbat Peh. And Torah Shabbat Peh, I feel this finis Arbabe Litzur from Achir. When David falls into Tahala, right? Tehillah David, Tahala is a bewilderment. So then, what are you going to do? Aramimcha lekaya Melech. Hisraima Mashallah. You want to lift that Torah Shabbat Peh, the David Hamelech Malchus that falls. Aramimcha Elika Hamelech. The way you do this is by lifting it up through Elika Bechinas Chesed Kel Kol Ayayim. Kel Elika is the aspect of Chesed. Hamelech lebechinas Binah liba. You bring it up to the heart. Shahalev benefesh kemelech b'Muhammad says in Sefer Yitzir, the heart is like a king, the king of the body. So arimimcha leha hamelech. You lift it up with chesed. Yimina techapkeni up to the melech, which is Binah liba. Va'avarecha shimcha. Hanuachar kachamalas ater shlapel lebechinas Chochmah. And then you bring it up to Chochmah. Hanikra Baruch. Chochmah is called Baruch. Va'avarcha shimcha. You brought it up to Binah. Good. That's chibuk. Now bring it up in a sheik into Chochmah. Al shem riboy debracha. How much bracha there is in that place. Ki hachachma makara bracha. And then there's the total fixing of zivuk gufa begufa. Hadran alach.